John Denver, the beloved American folk singer behind timeless hits like Take Me Home, Country Roads, and Annie's Song, was more than just a musical icon. He was a symbol of peace, nature, and heartfelt expression. With his boyish charm, signature glasses, and gentle voice, Denver captured the spirit of the 1970s like few others. But his tragic death in 1997 left fans heartbroken and filled with questions. Officially, it was ruled an accident, a small aircraft crash off the coast of California. But over the years, the mystery surrounding his final flight has deepened, and now, with previously buried reports and long-ignored testimonies emerging, it seems the truth may be darker than anyone expected. To understand the gravity of what really happened, we must first revisit the circumstances of his final day. On October 12, 1997, Denver took off in his experimental Rutan Long-Ez aircraft from Monterey Peninsula Airport in California. A seasoned pilot, Denver was no stranger to flying. He'd logged thousands of hours in the air and even advocated for aviation safety. So how could someone so experienced make such a fatal mistake? The National Transportation Safety Board (NTSB) initially pointed to a poorly placed fuel selector valve that forced Denver to turn around in his seat mid-flight, causing the plane to spiral out of control. But new evidence casts doubt on that conclusion and opens up disturbing possibilities. One of the most overlooked aspects of the investigation was Denver's recent struggles. In the months leading up to his death, John was battling demons far removed from the public eye. Despite his warm, optimistic music, Denver was enduring a difficult divorce, had been arrested for driving under the influence multiple times, and was reportedly dealing with depression. Some close friends, speaking anonymously in recently unearthed interviews, revealed that he had been more withdrawn than usual. He had this heaviness around him, said one friend. He smiled in public, but privately, you could tell he was hurting. Even more troubling are the inconsistencies in the crash investigation itself. Independent aviation experts now argue that the NTSB's focus on the fuel valve may have been a convenient explanation, one that diverted attention from more serious issues. First, there were structural concerns about the Long-Ez model Denver flew. Several aviation engineers criticized the plane's design, especially the placement of the fuel selector and the stability of its wing configuration. However, these concerns were downplayed during the investigation, possibly to avoid public panic about the safety of experimental aircraft. Then there's the chilling fact that Denver's medical certificate to fly had been revoked due to his DUI history, and he was technically flying illegally at the time of the crash. Some believe this may have pressured investigators to focus on pilot error rather than dig deeper. But new documents reveal that Denver had reached out to a former flight instructor weeks before the crash, discussing unusual issues with the aircraft. Those conversations were never included in the final NTSB report. Adding fuel to the conspiracy theories is the claim from a now-retired FAA employee who anonymously submitted documents to a journalist in 2022. The documents suggest that Denver's aircraft had been flagged for unusual repair work just days before the crash, work that was never formally logged or inspected. If true, this could indicate that Denver was flying an unairworthy plane, possibly unknowingly. But why would these reports be buried? Some theorize that the FAA didn't want to admit regulatory oversights, especially in a high-profile celebrity case. Beyond mechanical issues and potential regulatory cover-ups, there's the human element. John Denver's state of mind in the final weeks of his life has come under renewed scrutiny. While there's no evidence to suggest a deliberate crash, the intersection of emotional stress, legal troubles, and the sense of isolation Denver may have felt has raised unsettling questions. Could he have taken unnecessary risks out of a sense of recklessness or despair? His family insists that he was looking forward to new projects, including a proposed TV special and a children's book. But those close to him also acknowledge that he struggled with the pressure of fame and the fading spotlight. There's also an eerie coincidence that's hard to ignore. Denver had written and spoken often about flying and the peace it brought him. He once said in an interview, "When I'm in the air, it feels like I'm where I'm supposed to be. If I die flying, I'll die happy." That quote, resurfaced in various retrospectives, has led to speculation that he may have had a fatalistic attitude about aviation, a calm acceptance of the risk involved. But there's a thin line between peace and resignation, and those who knew him best have differing interpretations of that mindset. One of the most controversial new pieces of information comes from a recording Denver allegedly made in the studio just a week before his death. The song, never officially released, is described by studio insiders as deeply melancholic, even prophetic. The lyrics speak of letting go, finding peace, and saying goodbye with a smile. While some interpret this as the musings of a reflective artist, others see it as a veiled goodbye. Unfortunately, the studio has declined to release the full track, out of respect for the family, but a 20-second clip leaked online in 2023 reignited the debate about whether Denver's final flight was truly accidental. Denver's legacy complicates the narrative further. As an outspoken environmentalist, humanitarian, and advocate for global peace, many are hesitant to probe too deeply into the darker corners of his life. There's a desire to preserve the wholesome, hopeful image he projected. But as more stories come to light, a fuller picture emerges, one of a man struggling under the weight of expectations, aging in an industry obsessed with youth, and seeking solace in the skies. The tragic irony of Denver's death is that it could potentially have been prevented. Some experts argue that had he been flying a certified aircraft with proper maintenance oversight, and had the FAA been stricter about enforcing flight bans on revoked medical certificates, the crash might never have happened. The fact that it did raises uncomfortable questions about how fame, mental health, and regulatory systems intersect. What makes this mystery worse than we thought isn't just the possibility of technical failures or institutional oversights, it's the realization that John Denver, a man who brought joy to millions, may have spent his final days in quiet turmoil. He lived a life full of light but died under a shadow of uncertainty. The public image of Denver as an eternal optimist doesn't align with the private struggles now coming to light, and that dissonance forces fans to reconcile their admiration with the reality of a complicated man. In the years since his passing, tributes have poured in, documentaries have been made, and his music continues to inspire. But with this new understanding, perhaps the most respectful way to honor John Denver is not to shield his memory from painful truths, but to accept them. He was human, brilliant, flawed, loving, and hurting. His story is not just one of music and nature, but of resilience, struggle, and the cost of fame. As the mystery surrounding his final flight becomes clearer, it becomes more tragic, not because of sensational details, but because of what it reveals about how we treat our icons. We celebrate their art but often ignore their pain. John Denver's final flight wasn't just the end of a journey. It was the culmination of silent battles, systemic failures, and perhaps a longing for peace he could never fully find on the ground. Ultimately, the mystery of John Denver's death forces us to look beyond the headlines and examine the hidden layers of a life lived in the spotlight. It compels us to ask hard questions, not just about aviation safety or substance abuse or fame, but about empathy. What would we have seen if we had looked a little closer? And how many more stars will we lose before we learn to look beyond the smile and into the soul?